One of the most common questions I hear is that if there is a God and he is good and loving, how is there evil and suffering in the world? The interesting thing about that particular question is that there are really two levels to the question of suffering. There's the philosophical level, which says how do we reconcile the existence of God, who's good, with evil and suffering in the world? But there's also an emotional level to the question. Because most people, when they encounter evil and suffering, it isn't the philosophical problem that bothers them, nearly as much as it is that when they encounter evil and suffering, it hits them at the heart level. They aren't often lamenting and pining the philosophical problem, they're personally wounded. I think the reason, and this question is so common, and is so tricky in some ways to answer, is that it operates at these two levels. That said, what can we say about the problem in just a few short minutes? Well, there are a few things I'd like to posit. The first one being, you can't argue from the existence of evil to the non-existence of God. A few atheists have tried it, and it's actually not a logical progression from one to the other. Removing God from the picture doesn't effectively remove the problem, it just effectively eliminates the best explanation to ground and solve the problem to begin with. You see, evil is real, it's something. And to say that categories like good and bad are just based on emotion, on what's good for me, causes some serious problems. I was an athlete in my undergrad years at university, which for me begs the question, how do we know a good runner and a bad runner? You see, goodness and badness are made sense by the existence of some set of scoring system. In the case of a track athlete, it's based on their times. 9 seconds is a fast 100 meter, 20 seconds is a slow 100 meter. The moment we start utilizing words like evil and suffering, we are actually implying, whether we realize it or not, some sort of moral standard. We are implying that there is a way that the world ought to be. But if we are simply matter and molecules living in a godless universe, where are we getting these ideas that the world ought to be any particular way? C.S. Lewis put it this way. He said, "My argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got the idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he knows what a straight line looks like. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust?" Here's the interesting thing. Because we live in a world where there is pain and suffering, and all of us are forced to deal with the question of pain and suffering, whether we are Christians or atheists or Muslims or what have you. The atheist's answer to the problem is really just to shrug. That's just the way the world is. The late thinker Christopher Hitchens in his book Morality wrote, "To the dumb question, why me, the cosmos barely bothers to return the answer, why not?" But what of Christianity then? Well, it's interesting. When most of us are faced with evil and suffering, most of us do not want something said about evil, but rather we want something done about evil. At the heart of the Christian claim is a God who is compassionate. Think about that. What does compassion mean? Well, it's actually a compound word from two Latin words, com, meaning with, and passion, meaning suffering. For someone to have compassion means they don't simply look at the situation of hurt and say that it is wrong, but rather they step into the situation to do something actively to remedy it. Only in Christianity will you find the idea that there is not only a God who set the world in motion, but a God who, when it comes to evil and suffering, in the person of Jesus Christ and the action of his death on the cross, stepped out of eternity into humanity in the person of the Trinity to do something about suffering.